We've had our first confirmation of Bundesliga Matchday 30, which we'll get to obviously, and it's time to look back at everything that happened in what was mainly a big week for the likes of the relegation and Europe. We'll briefly go over the Friday game because it did have some implication to the relegation fight. It finished 1-1 between St. Pauli and Cologne. As I said, it was a big game at the bottom, but considering results later on in the weekend, St. Pauli probably should have wished they did better, and they're now in a position where they are kind of struggling a bit. There's like a decent buffer between them and the relegation spots, which is a bit of a problem. Especially with only 4 games of the season remaining. I mean, they're 5 points behind 15th, or 4 depending. I'm actually recording this while Borussia Mönchengladbach are playing Mainz, so it ranges from 4 to 6, which is a problem with only that few games remaining. But as I said, I don't think Mainz are really, or St. Pauli are really that good, or don't have the ability within themselves and the quality to rescue themselves. Like, I just don't think it's possible for them. Well, for Cologne, they've done enough now, I think, to stay up. They have a 5-point gap with 5 games remaining. And again, I just don't think like the likes of St. Pauli and Augsburg, who will also get to just have the quality in them to close this gap. There was so little time remaining. So on Wolfsburg, the game against Union was really jam-packed full of stories in what was a pretty irrelevant game in the grand scheme of things. So obviously Wolfsburg, they're fighting relegation, while Union appointed Marie-Louise Eta, and this was her first game. And Wolfsburg won this 2-1, thanks to goals from Patrick Wimmer and Dusan Pecinovic. This was their first win in 13 games. It just closes the gap to St. Pauli, as I said, but they do find themselves 7 points off to 15th, and so now they're just looking to potentially try and close down St. Pauli in the hope that they can overtake them for the relegation playoff. Obviously, it's worth remembering that these two play each other on the final day of the season, but Wolfsburg really shouldn't have won this game. They were horrible. Like they averaged an open play XG of 0.13 in the whole game, so they got very lucky. Obviously, you can make the cliched argument that, like, in this sort of situation, you kind of need luck on your side, and Wolfsburg had it. While for Union, they were very unlucky. Like, they should have won this, and obviously, because of Marie-Louise Eta and who she is, she obviously got a lot of eyeballs were on this game, and obviously, any sort of criticism she received is pretty much unfair, because, like, it wasn't as if Union were bad. In fact, considering the situation and considering that Union were playing a style of play which is completely different to what they're used to, the fact that they played so well after a week of transition, I mean, fair play. As I said, for Wolfsburg, in the grand scheme of things, I feel like this result will be meaningless because they have a very tough run of fixtures to end the season. Like the St. Pauli game will be tough because you're away in Hamburg, and so the next game is against Borussia Mönchengladbach, and so if you want to go into like this game against St. Pauli on the final day in like this final, you have to win this game. But if you don't win this game, then I just don't think Wolfsburg are going to even be able to make the relegation playoff. But as I said, I still think this bottom 3 will be the bottom 3 come the end of the season. Borussia Dortmund lost 2-1 to Hoffenheim, which presented the chance for Bayern to win the league on the Sunday. But again, this is the same as last game and the game before, and the Dortmund were just horrible in attack. They were very poor. But granted, in defending wise, they were just a bit unlucky. And you can more or less label the 2 Hoffenheim penalties as harsh in a way. I mean, the first one, which Niklas Süle conceded, he fell, got injured, and the ball touched his arm on his way down, and it resulted in the penalty of Süle went off injured. And then the other penalty was right at the death of the game, which Andrej Kramaric scored both of them. So it does open the door for Hoffenheim in the race for the Champions League potentially. I mean, they're 2 points behind Stuttgart, So, and they had been struggling as of late, so if they're able to build on this, then there's a chance they could sneak in. Then we had a derby on Saturday. It was the Nord derby between Werder Bremen and Hamburg. It was a big win for Bremen. They won 3-1. It does, as I mentioned, it gives them like a nice buffer to the relegation zone, or the relegation playoff spot. But it was a real crazy game. I mean, Hamburg had 2 players sent off. One was overturned by VAR. And then you can make an argument that maybe Leandro Bittencourt should have been sent off for a challenge he made on Miro Muheim. But he didn't. He was just given a yellow and he stayed on. But as I said, like for Bremen, like it was an important game for them, as they've been struggling. But they win this, and now they have one last kind of easy game remaining, and that's against Augsburg. And if they win that, they should be fine. And that's in 2 weeks' time. Well, for Hamburg, in the absence of Luka Vuskovic, they've looked horrible in defending, which is a bit of a problem when a lone player is your best player defending-wise. Like in the past few games where he's been injured, he's meant to return soon, they've struggled a lot. And if he doesn't stay in the summer for another year, then they're really going to have to find a way to address the Vuskovic-shaped hole, the Luka Vuskovic-shaped hole in their back line, because obviously from November they can fill Luka Vuskovic with Mario Vuskovic once his doping ban expired. So I think that will be interesting, because if it's a problem that if you're not able to solve, you will be fighting relegation next season. And obviously, as we've seen with some of these teams like St. Pauli, Heidenheim, the second season is always probably the more difficult one. And so if Hamburg want to establish themselves in the Bundesliga again and become the team that they are meant to be, they need to finish, or next season needs to be strong too, and then they can build on that. And then after the second season, they should be okay to a degree. But they're in a similar situation to Bremen, they're level on points with them. And Hamburg also have a difficult run of fixtures to end the season. They play Hoffenheim, then Frankfurt, then Freiburg, and then Leverkusen on the final day. So I imagine Hamburg have done enough, but it will be tight for them. And it'll be a bit squeaky bum time. Then on the other Saturday game was between Leverkusen and Augsburg. Augsburg actually won this 2-1. A late penalty scored by Fabian Rieder basically all but confirms their safety. They were never really in any relegation trouble anyway when they sacked or when they hired Manuel Baum and the work he's done, so it's never really been like a true worry for them. But at the end of the day, actually Augsburg now find themselves in a very interesting situation, because now, out of quite a crazy and complicated way, Augsburg could play in Europe next season. It would require Bayern Munich, Freiburg. It requires other teams for them to play in Europe next season, but it's a possibility, which is kind of crazy, if we're being honest. Like how Augsburg could potentially be playing European football. Which, I mean, who would have thought, they had this bold plan to sign Sadio Wagner, it fails, and then they hire Baum and they end up qualifying for Europe for some reason. But the way they did this, as well as with the penalty, it was a monster game from Finn Dahlmann. He had 9 saves. And Leverkusen had 32 shots in this game and were only able to score once. And so that does mean they are, granted, we'll get to why, they're now 4 points behind Stuttgart, who are in 4th. So the chance is still there, but they need to stop dropping points in these types of games. But obviously for Leverkusen, attention can turn elsewhere, because again, for Leverkusen, they could end up in the Champions League anyway, depending on the coefficient. But next, in midweek, they play in the Pokal against Bayern. So it will be interesting how that pans out. Then the Saturday afternoon game was between Frankfurt and Leipzig. Leipzig won this 3-1. This was actually their first ever win in Frankfurt, which is a bit of a crazy stat, considering how long Leipzig would have been in the league for over 10 years now. It was helped by Jan Diamande, who opened the scoring in the game. So obviously the talk is Diamande's worth 100 million. I don't think he's worth 100 million yet, but I do think with the way he plays and stuff, he's showing that there was a player there who could be worth 100 million further down the line. I mean, in his debut, granted, like most people, I had no clue who Diomande was when he joined Leipzig in the summer. He has 12 goals and 6 assists in 24, I think it's like 28 or 9 Bundesliga games, which is ridiculous. Like, I obviously was skeptical of the 20 million they paid in the summer, but obviously it's been worth it in the end. But for Leipzig to win, basically, I think they more or less consolidate a Champions League place. I mean, they will likely qualify unless they have some like spectacular collapse. I mean, the final 4 games are pretty easy. So I think they will be in a Champions League spot in the summer or come a month's time. Well, for Frankfurt, this was actually only Albert Riera's 3rd loss as Frankfurt head coach, which is pretty impressive. And I think if Frankfurt will be definitely an interesting team to watch in the summer, to see what sort of business they do and where they go. And ultimately how, at the back end of the summer, how they come out of it and how they're playing under Riera. Then on Sunday, Freiburg beat Heidenheim 2-1. It was a bit of an easy win for them. But for the grand scheme of things, for Freiburg, it's everything outside of the Bundesliga, which is more relevant. And this is a big week for them. So obviously on Thursday, they qualified for the semi-finals of the Europa League after they beat Celta Vigo in Spain. So that means the Europa League dream is alive, and they play Braga in the semi-finals, which I think they could be able to win, and then they have a tough final against a Premier League side. But with the way they've been playing, I think anything's possible. And the way they've been playing, it does remind me of the Europa League run that Frankfurt did a couple of years ago. And then this week, they are in the DFB Pokal semi-finals as well against Stuttgart. And obviously, the complex situation regarding qualification that I mentioned earlier, a lot of it actually just depends on Freiburg. So the fact Freiburg needs to win the Europa League and not win the Pokal, etc. And if they would do that, then they win then 9th will be in the Bundesliga in Europe next season. So yeah, it's exciting times at Freiburg, and I think it will be one to watch, or will be the biggest story to watch over the coming weeks. Bayern beat Stuttgart 4-2. Bayern actually went down first. They have had a habit of looking quite sluggish at the beginning, especially when they have like these double-header weeks where they've had an intense Champions League game, and then they have a league game afterwards. I mean, we saw it last weekend we saw it 2 weeks ago when they had a Champions League game and they had the first leg and they were playing Real Madrid in midweek, and they struggled a bit, and we saw that again here. But again, like, you rotate your team with the eyes on what's coming in midweek, and then your teams, and like you rotate your teams a bit crap, and obviously that resulted in some problems, but Bayern overcame them in the end. Thank God Alphonso Davies and Harry Kane both scored, because without them your title-winning goals would have been scored by Rafael Guerreiro and Nicholas Jackson, which history cannot allow that to happen in any way at all. But now we can rewrite history and say Davies or Kane scored the title-winning goal. But again, obviously, the win means Bayern won the title. I mean, there's not really much more to say. We knew this was going to happen, and there's not really much more to say about it. Obviously, the attention will now turn towards the Pokal, where Bayern plays Leverkusen, which how we saw they played against each other last month. If it's similar to that, it won't be easy. And then it's a Champions League where they're on the side of the draw where I think the winner will come from. Or it's either Bayern or PSG. So a treble is a real possibility for Bayern. And I think that just kind of shows, back at the point how they're one of the best teams around. They're obviously a lot better compared to last season, and the game against Real Madrid showed that in midweek. And then the final game, as I said, I'm recording during this, it's Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Mainz. I mean, there's a possibility. So at the moment, Gladbach are winning. Whether Gladbach win this game, I have no idea. But it does open the possibility for both of these teams to also qualify for Europe in a complicated way, because they're only 3 points behind Augsburg and both have a better goal difference too. And so if one of them finished 9th, then it opens the possibility for Europe. Well, it will be the Conference League. Obviously, Mainz crashed out of the Conference League, and I mean crashed out quite literally against Strasbourg on Thursday, whereas Borussia Mönchengladbach haven't been in Europe since they were in the Champions League 5 years ago now. So I think that'd be quite funny if Gladbach somehow end up in the relegation playoff, or not in Europe, I mean, because if they don't win this game against Mainz, relegation is also a possibility still, because they're only 4 points ahead of St. Pauli with 4 games left. And the duality of Borussia Mönchengladbach, right? They're competing for Europe or potentially getting relegated. So yeah, obviously the table, Bayern top, they win the league, 79 points, Dortmund are second on 64, Leipzig are third on 59, Stuttgart are fourth on 56, Hoffenheim are fifth on 54, and Leverkusen are sixth on 52. Then at the bottom, Heidenheim will probably be relegated soon. They will be relegated next week if they do not beat St. Pauli. Wolfsburg are then 17th, 2 points behind St. Pauli in 16th, who are 5 points behind Bremen currently. It could be Gladbach, who knows, in 15th. And so next weekend, it is basically relegation is the main priority now. It's, as I said, St. Pauli versus Heidenheim, Wolfsburg against Borussia Mönchengladbach, Bremen play Stuttgart, Hamburg play Hoffenheim. Then elsewhere, Bayern play Mainz, Dortmund play Freiburg. On Friday, RB Leipzig play Union Berlin. So let me know what you think about the match day, about Bayern becoming champions, and if any other team caught your eye or player or anything, just let me know.